Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, on Tuesday you asked me how I was doing, and then you tried to get my answer to take my answer to get me in trouble. So, Tony, how are you doing today? I'm much more interested in that.
Well, I was thinking about that while I was not being called on during today's media session with the linebackers. So I don't want to anger anybody, and I'm going to say I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope the sports information department at Ohio State is doing fantastic. They have done a great job this spring, getting us as much access to players and coaches as they can, and I am totally appreciative of that.
Mm-hmm. Got virtually all the running backs, both of the linebackers. So yeah, we're off to a roaring start this spring.
And before we did talk to Al Washington and Teradja Mitchell and Dallas Gant today, Thursday. Before we get into that, Tom, we should probably spend a couple of hours on what former Michigan wide receiver Nico Collins had to say recently. And I don't know. I saw somebody said he talked to the Spun, but that can't be true because I don't know that anybody talks to the Spun. The Spun just goes and grabs stuff from like other places that have talked to players. So wherever. But this is what Nico Collins had to say about the gap between Ohio State and Michigan football. He begins, it's way closer. I'd say the talent is the same kind of talent. I would say there's not a difference between the two. Every time we play Ohio State, we know what kind of game it's going to be. That's going to be all four quarters. With the athletes they got and we got, I'd say we match up. They don't have more athletes than we got. I feel like it's pretty much equal, or we pretty much have more than them. That's it, man. Talent-wise, I'd say it's pretty much equal. There wasn't no advantage with them. None at all. Tom, would you
Tony,
like to say
I have some follow-up questions.
Okay, go ahead. I'll try to answer them for you.
So if it wasn't the talent, what would you say has been the reason behind scores such as 62-39 and 55-27? Is that coaching? Is that just the general bloody-mindedness of the universe striking at the most inopportune moment? Because it seems like there's some difference between those two, levels of performance in those given days. So what do you think that might be attributable to, if not a talent gap?
Right, and I'll be Nico Collins in this exercise. I understand what you're saying. You look at the scoreboard and it looks bad. What the scoreboard doesn't show you, Tom, if I can call you that, is it doesn't show you where the refs come from, where their home states are. It also does not show you, Tom, which of these players have had virtual classes. So, would you like to retract what you've said now?
I would like to apologize for neglecting to consider the impact of online classes and potentially cheating refs. And that's definitely. I think we're all 3 touchdowns better than we were this time last year due to all the things we've been doing online. So I think that's probably a very reasonable explanation. I withdraw the objection.
When I was reading this and hearing about it, I just kept going back to your interview with Danny Vanatsky when he's like, I'm so upset because we were going to put 70 on those guys. Mm-hmm. and that's the mentality. And that's what everybody expected. It was going to be bad. It was going to be ugly. Nico Collins, of course, wouldn't have been part of it because he opted out, accepted money, and then couldn't come back. And so he was on the outside looking in, and of course then didn't have to avert his eyes at the carnage that would have happened. To say it's way closer, we've discussed this in the past when somebody else brought up this argument that there is no talent gap, and there's all kinds of proof of it. And sure, maybe it's not the top 5 recruits of every class that, because that's comparable. It's like the bottom 10 and bottom 15 where you start to see there's 7 or 8 guys in Michigan's class that are ranked in the 700s or whatever, and there's like 2 in Ohio State's class, and you've got like the top guy in Michigan's class would be the number 7 guy in Ohio State's class, and the number 2 guy in Michigan's class would be about like 13 in Ohio State's class, just here and there. And of course, no, rankings are not the end all be all, but they're a pretty good judge of where teams are, especially when you count the national championships and things of that nature. And to say that, look, if you want to say talent is close or equal, That's one thing. To say, we pretty much have more than that. Now that's another level of crazy. Like you're already on one level of crazy, and then you just, you know what? I'm going to double down. We got more athletes. And sure, okay, Ronnie Bell is a great athlete. He's not an outside receiver, and if you've got four great athletes and they all play inside receiver, you know what? You've got some bad fits there, and so I'm not going to blame the coaches. Jim Harbaugh is one of the great head coaches in Michigan history, Big Ten history, Big Ten East history, Legends history. Even though Legends predated him and he wasn't part of that, clearly one of the best head coaches in the NFC West ever. One of the top two Harbaugh head coaches in my lifetime, NFL speaking. And so, but yeah, if it's not the athletes, Tom, I'll throw your own question back to you. Like, then what is it?
Well, I think I will have to respectfully disagree with Mr. Collins, because I think there might be a little bit of a skill gap. I think if you look at certain spots on the field, I mean, you could probably take roughly 22 of them. But if you just want to pick a handful, I think you could look at, for example, the interior defensive line. And I think there's probably a decent gap there between the talent levels at those two places, in those two programs. I think if you look at the wide receiver position, I think Michigan may have learned all of the wrong lessons from the Rich Rodriguez era of wide receiver recruiting. That may be a problem. I think you may have some issues with running back recruiting, such as when was the last Michigan running back who was all Big Ten? I mean,
Chris Howard? 2003?
I'm going to guess Mike Hart probably was at some point. Yeah. But yes, Mike Hart is now old enough to have had a bunch of, played a few years in the NFL and then climbed up the coaching ranks to now be Michigan's running back coach. The last, the most recent all Big Ten running back in your room should not be the guy who's got gray hair and is, wearing a whistle. That's not great. And, there's a bunch of other reasons that, I think they've been a little too wedded to the past and a little too slow to embrace change and all of that. And, it's just, the talent is just not there. The talent is just not there. It's good, but it's not, right now in college football, there are a very small handful of truly, truly elite programs. Ohio State is in that group. Michigan isn't. So yes, there's a gap. Sorry, I am deeply sorry to tell you this is not a reflection on Nico Collins. Nico Collins is one of the few players on the Michigan team that I would say absolutely Ohio State would have taken Nico Collins last year if that had been an option. I don't know how many other spots on the field you would have said that. I mean, we did the Tale of the Tape show every year, and I feel like we came up with 3-ish position groups where it's yeah, you could make an argument for Michigan there, a decent argument for Michigan, but offensive line, no. Defensive line, no. Cornerbacks, no. And Ohio State's cornerbacks weren't great last year, but they were better than Michigan's. Dax Hill, yeah, Ohio State would take Dax Hill, absolutely. Safeties, sure, we can absolutely have that conversation, but running backs, no. Quarterbacks, no. Wide receivers, again, Ohio State would take Nico Collins, but not the rest of the wide receivers. So where is the talent equal or their Michigan's is greater?
Cade McNamara.
I take it all back.
Thank you.
Cade McNamara not currently projected to go behind Zach Wilson in the draft. I mean, that's just facts only.
Facts only. Because you say Michigan doesn't like change, but I would look at their quarterbacks and argue differently. Joe Milton, out of here. Brandon Peters, gone. Wilton Spate, see ya. All of these different guys. I mean, you got guys transferring all over the place, and we'll see what Cade McNamara and JJ McCarthy and the kid from Texas Tech, Alan Bowman can do. Because we've done this before. How many Michigan players would start at Ohio State? And you would have to go back, I don't know, to 2000 or maybe 2004, to a time where you would have more Michigan players starting than Ohio State players starting. If you were to go okay, would this guy start? Would Chad Henne start over Troy Smith or Justin Zwick in 2004 when Henne was a freshman? I mean, if Troy Smith couldn't beat out Justin Zwick at that point, I'm guessing Chad Henne could. And we don't need to revisit 17 years ago, but I'm telling you, that's how far back you would have to go to find a time when maybe you would choose more Wolverines for your starting lineup than Ohio State Buckeyes. So, and now, like, if we were to talk about this year, Daxton Hill is the only guy that I think would help, like, improve that. Man, certainly don't need anybody out from the offensive line. Nobody, no linebackers, no defensive line, no receivers. I mean, no running backs. It's one guy that you could find a spot for in one of those two safety spots. And can you think of anybody else?
I'm racking my brain at like the cornerbacks they have back this year. Like, I mean, just like the spots where Ohio State, you could make, make an argument like Ohio State could use an upgrade right now, like maybe at cornerback, depending on how things shake out this spring. But there's not a guy there for Michigan. There's not like a big, all Big Ten caliber nose tackle there. Right? I mean, like, yeah,
Aiden Hutchinson, no. I mean, I'll stick with Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison and Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste. Aiden Hutchinson is fine. He's not an improvement.
Yeah. No, it's just, it's interesting that you mentioned 2004 as the last year that Michigan might have had more talent. You know what else 2004 was the last? Michigan Big Ten championship.
Well,
you want to know how many Ohio State has won since then?
How many?
I would also like to know. I wish I had looked it up, but it's a bunch. It's a bunch. It was like every year from 2005 to 2010 or so. And then what? How many Big Ten championship games have they won? They would have won in 2012, except they were banned.
14,
14,
16,
17. No, 14.
16.
Yeah, 14, 17, 18, 19, 20. So 5 more there. So yeah. Probably only roughly 10 or so Ohio State Big Ten championships since the last one for Michigan, which, I mean,
who's counting?
Look, listen. Anyone can have a bad 17 years or so. Like, it happens. Who among us has not had a bad 17 years or so?
I'm with you right there, Tom. Like, the first 17 were bad. The last 17 have been bad.
How were the middle 17?
Not there yet, Tom. Not there yet. So yeah, there's to think that the talent is equated or equal, or it's so, like, Nico Collins is definitely a Michigan man, because this is one of the most Michigan man quotes you'll ever see. Like, this is the attitude, this is the belief system you have to have at Michigan. And no 62-39 or 56-27 is going to convince you otherwise. That's just the media at this point. The scores, that's just the media telling you those are lies, Tom.
They are. It was not quite as Michigan man as it could be, because my understanding is he did not directly blame, the poor moral turpitude of other programs for. So it wasn't the most Michigan you could be, but it's probably it's in the conversation.
Yeah, there you go. And I'm sure we'll talk about Michigan more as the days go on, because it is one of our favorite subjects. And there's always something to talk about. And they always provide content for those of us who enjoy it, who need it, who thrive on it, who live off of it, who can't live without it. So if we were to predict like what the next thing from the Michigan camp would be, like, Jim Harbaugh has said in the past that he expects to win the Big Ten or something like that, or that should be the expectation. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's something like that where he comes out and says something kind of off the wall, and then when you try to remind him about his schedule, then you're like, but Jim, if you look at your schedule right now, it sure doesn't look like it's a Big Ten championship schedule. It looks like you might have some losses on there, and then of course he would shut down. And that would be the last you'd hear from him.
I just want to reach through my camera on my computer and just pinch your cheeks, because you're just so adorable when you forget that this is the true freshman quarterback is literally walking on water right now season. This is spring football, Tony. JJ McCarthy is about to part the seas and lead Michigan to triumph. And it's not like there's a track record of that not working out in the past. So I'm sure it's going to play out exactly as it looks this time of year.
Well, let's talk about the last time Michigan started a true freshman at quarterback, which I think would be 2004.
I believe it would be.
Which, as we just established, was their last Big Ten title. So, crap. You are correct.
Let's have a conversation about correlation and causation after we stop on the show. We'll talk about that later.
Listen, let's put it together. You've got a freshman quarterback that could be starting. You've got Mike Hart. Mm-hmm. He was also on that 2004 team. I don't know that you need anything else. Ohio State does not know who their quarterback is. Same mm-hmm. situation as in 2004. Mm-hmm. Anything else with the 2004 Ohio State team that is similar?
Talented wide receiver room. Yeah, young quarterbacks. What was that?
That was a home game for Ohio State, though.
That was a fourth year Ohio State head coach, and if you include the year that Ryan Day kind of coached but didn't, fourth year Ohio State head coach, like, man, this is
the parallels.
Ryan Day's secretary is named Lincoln, and Harbaugh's secretary is named Kennedy. Like, oh man, this is some wild unexplained. Yeah, this is what was the old Robert Stack show? I'm completely blanking on it.
Unsolved Mysteries.
Unsolved Mysteries. Yes, this is a real unsolved mystery stuff going on right now. You're going to go hide under the covers. I'm scared.
So if Ohio State does lose to Michigan this year, we can tout it. Like, we told you guys, and we can mm-hmm. I'm sure everybody would love to be reminded of the time that we told them that this is coming.
This is the nice thing about doing as many podcasts as we do. At some point during the year, we will have said literally every possible thing. Like, sometime in July, I'll be like, listen, I'm not saying UTEP's going to win the national championship. I'm just saying, like, a UTEP UMass national championship game is a possibility. And then when it happens, it'll be like, man, I was the only one on earth to predict it, because no one on earth does more podcasts than we do.
Just every time something happens, we'll mention it, and the other person will go, called it. Remember when I called that? Yes.
Called it.
Yes, we remember. We do remember that. Tom, let's talk about the linebackers, because that's who we talked to today. As I said, got Al Washington, we got Dallas Gant, and we got Teradja Mitchell. Dallas Gant was first, mentioned that he is out this spring with a foot injury, but will be back for fall camp. Al Washington said nobody is in a position right now to where that doesn't affect them negatively, so that is something to keep an eye on. He is, presumably a middle linebacker, as we know, as we have discussed, but when he was asked about that, Dallas Gant said, everybody's playing everywhere. Nobody's anywhere. Everybody's everywhere. And sure, we got to learn everything. He was asked about the Sams. Oh, I don't want to say who's there because we're all playing everywhere. And it's like, are you though? I mean, yes, sure. It's three practices in. And Al Washington said, you guys probably know the depth chart better than I do. And I don't know that that's true, but at least we're willing to put one out there.
Yeah, I mean, Teradja Mitchell's at the Will, Dallas Gant's at the Sam, at the Mike. Yeah, Dallas Gant's at the Mike. Who, the Sam, I feel like you could. It's probably Kayvon Pope / Craig Young, depending on how is that a bullet? Is that a Sam? Is that something in the middle? But yeah, I have never understood, and this is not an Ohio State thing. This is like an every program thing. This is just like just an absolute epidemic among college football coaches. Like, who are you worried is going to find out something about your program right now? Like, is it you're scared of those dirty lying SOBs on the gray team finding out who you're like? What are you worried about? You're gonna have a football game on TV before you play anything that resembles anything of an important kind of football game. So like, people are going to see who's playing where. Like, you can tell us it's okay. It's not the end of the world. But this is, that's just the secretive nature of college football coaches, which, we can have a whole separate conversation about that a little later on in the show. But it's you just that is just I understand it to a certain degree where they don't want to, if I mention one guy and I don't mention another guy. Is that going to make that second guy really upset? Is that going to create a problem in the room? Like, whatever. Like, but if you're asked about a specific guy, like you could talk about a specific guy and where he's playing. It's okay. And if you're saying we're trying him at a couple different spots right now, he's been working more at fill in the blank. Like that is a thing you could say. So when you don't want to say that, that's a little bit like, I think we could do a little better here, but
yeah,
but I don't get to make those decisions for people.
Right. I like it would be nice if maybe you're more open with just your thought process. Like, well, we like Teradja at will because he can do this. In Dallas, what he brings that makes him a possibility at Mike is this. And somebody asked him, yeah, if you had a game today, where would this guy be? And Al Washington is like, ha, nice try. And these are the lengths that we have to go to try to get some answers. And it's not like we're trying to trick you. We would like to know as much about the team as we can so that when we talk about it, we end up at least we come from a place of understanding, of knowledge, of somebody telling us that, instead of, well, I mean, we'll just assume that it's still this and this and this, and then we'll speculate about this. It would be like, oh, I think we're looking for is just information so that we can relay it to readers, to viewers. I don't know that Jim Harbaugh is subscribed to BuckeyeScoop.com. I'm sure maybe somebody in his war room and in his offices is subscribed, but there's going to be a lot of film between 11 games before they hit Michigan. So it's like, well, whatever happens now. And sure, they don't know everything. It is 3 practices. I get that, but there is still some thought processes that you could share and just impart some information. And Al Washington has always been great. Like his first time doing this with Ohio State 2 years ago or whatever, when coaches would talk for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, he spent 23 minutes with us. I still remember 23 minutes with us, just talking, answering questions, giving us so much. And this was, I don't know if it's a departure or you're just being more, you've got more Ohio State in you now in terms of but he did give us some good information, but also there was a lot of, you can try, but you're not getting anything.
Right. And I think there's a, maybe something that is not being thought about is, what is our role? Our role is to take the information we're given and explain it to people and set people up so that they understand what's happening. So that when they see Tough Borland chasing Devontae Smith down the field, they know, hey, that's not actually Tough Borland's fault. That's someone else's fault. That's the kind of thing we're here because you don't want people to get blamed for things that are not their fault. And when we understand your thinking better and your mindset better, and what the thought process is on hey, all your linebackers have dropped weight. Why is that? What's the thought process there? That's something then we can explain and disseminate to the people so they understand what's going on and why these decisions are being made and all of that. And I think there's probably an idea that they're not accountable to, they don't have to answer to the fan base, which is, both true and also not representative of reality because the fan base is going to have thoughts regardless. So they, you would think you would want them to have as informed a thought as they could have, but if they don't, then you can't get mad when you think people are having uninformed thoughts about stuff. That's kind of the trade-off there.
There was still some interesting stuff that came out, just Dallas Gant talking about the blueprint that was laid out by the 4 seniors who have left, and it's been easy to step into that role. He's the natural leader, but and Teradja Mitchell said he's a natural leader as well. That there's just, they all have learned how to do this from those 4 guys, and and Al Washington talked about each of the things that those 4 guys have imparted on everybody, and that you just continue. It's kind of like what we've talked about over the years with the wide receivers. You go back to Evan Spencer, who laid the groundwork for Terry McLaurin and Paris Campbell, who did it for Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and so on. There's this lineage that you can go back to and to see how it is. And he talked about there's a standard of linebacker at Ohio State that goes well beyond his time because his dad was one of those Ohio State linebackers, and it goes back beyond him. And so the standard is the standard, and there is no substitute for that. And he seems to think that they've got enough guys there. And it was interesting when somebody asked him about Tommy Eichenberg. He gets up, he sits up in his chair and he starts to talk about Tommy Eichenberg because he loves that dude. And so he's very high on his guys, but of course there's, as we said, 3 practices in, and I guess the good part in not going over any type of depth chart is that the jobs are open. Like if you're an Ohio State linebacker, there is nothing that says you can't win a job, right? Like there has been, the past 3 years for Teradja Mitchell, who said, he's studying more than ever because now it's like he can see the horizon. There's nothing in front of him. It's, the whole sled dog thing. The view has finally changed for him. He's not just looking at the back of Malik Harrison or Pete Werner or whomever. And so I think that's maybe the case for everybody. And so this is a time of great learning for Al Washington and all of the linebackers. And maybe when we talk to all of the coaches after spring, if that happens, dare to dream, we'll have it'll be more open because there'll be more to talk about. Or Tom, will he just be like, well, this was just 15 practices. 16th practice starts in preseason.
We're too close to the season now. Don't want to get that out. That was more of a early spring conversation. Like, but we just
should ask in spring. That's more of a practice number 5 question.
One thing that was interesting was Teradja Mitchell. I mean, you talked about the fact that this is, he's finally got this opportunity, and he was asked about, he's dropped some weight. What was the thinking there? And he said he's actually changed his diet. He followed Justin Fields' example last year and went vegan, and then decided he liked fish too much. Now he's eating fish in addition to a vegan diet, so that makes him a pescatarian. And he said that. I'm not necessarily an expert on these diets, but that's okay. He is. He said it's made him feel better. It has. He's lighter. He just he wakes up feeling better in the morning. So these are kind of these are major changes, and that's that's something that I think most people would view as something of a sacrifice to not to give up a food that probably most people would say they enjoy, and that's kind of an example of the level of dedication and sacrifice that they're making right now to get on the field, because I think he recognizes this is an opportunity, and this may be a one shot deal, because he was asked, hey, are you going to, you have the opportunity to come back for another year. Are you thinking about that as a possibility? He was like, no, I mean, it doesn't sound like that's even something that's kind of crossed his mind yet. And, maybe at the end of the year, you decide you want to come back and put another year on film. But, I think the sort of default answer there is probably like, hey, this is the contract year. This is the senior year, 4th year. You're probably getting close to getting a degree at this point. So, go put a good year of film out there, and then go win a starting job, or go win an NFL job at some point. So that's and I would assume that that's probably true of all of those linebackers who've been sitting for 3 years, and now they finally have this opportunity to win one of those starting jobs.
Well, that's even going to the defensive ends, like Zach Harrison, talking about how his mentality changed, seeing what happened with Tommy Togiak from year 2 to year 3. So it's like he's approaching that as a contract year as well, and no reason for these linebackers to not do the same. And then if it turns out, I'm a 3rd rounder right now, but I could be a 1st rounder in a year, then you make that decision. Dallas Gant, who is he's basically coaching at this point in the spring, coaching up the other guys, and was asked, hey man, who's flashing on offense? Who's looking good? And you're always wanting a young guy answer there, like, oh man, you should have seen what Travion Henderson did. No, he said that Chris Olave continues to look good on offense. Tom, is that
what position does he play?
That?
Is he a freshman? Receiver. I don't remember seeing him in the recruiting class. He's a wide receiver? No, okay.
Little used wide receiver.
Okay. And
skinny
so
guy.
Are you projecting him to be a starter this fall based on that information?
Whoa. 3 practices in, Tom. Let's slow down on the starters and the depth chart. That'll come in preseason and fall camp when you get to know more. Like right now, Chris Olave a starter, you can't say that. No, but he's looking good in the spring, so just keep that in mind. If he does win a job, remember he looked good in spring.
That's so. Do you think he could be this year's Bam Childress? Is that what I'm hearing?
Whoa, Tom! 3 practices in. Let's not go crazy.
We're not to the spring game yet. No.
No. We still got 12 more practices. If he flashes in the spring game, now we can talk. But until then, 14 practices, no. 15 practices, then we can have a conversation.
Okay, I'm going to set a reminder on my phone for after the spring game that we can revisit the conversation. And just for those who might be wondering about the spring game, officially there's no word yet on tickets. If you want to go listen to the Morning Scoop episode on Thursday, I talked to Nevada Buck, and he has some insight into what that's probably going to look like. Probably 4-seat pods and 30-ish% of capacity, give or take. You can listen to that whole conversation on the Morning Scoop episode with Nevada Buck that dropped on Thursday morning. But it sounds like that game is probably going to be, they don't have an official kickoff time, probably early afternoon, like a noon or a 1, kind of a normal, typical spring game kickoff time that then sometimes gets changed because the weather's really bad. Like it's all a little flexible, but that's probably, they're probably waiting on the Big Ten Network to kind of figure out a schedule before they nail that down for sure.
Isn't it time, Tom? I saw Michigan is not going to do a public spring practice game. Isn't it time for a night spring game, don't you think?
You don't want the fans getting too rowdy for the spring game. It's always a big
first
concern.
Time back. First time back in the stadium, that would be bad.
I have never understood Michigan's reticence to have like a spring game. That is just like culturally not a thing in Michigan. And I don't get that. It's like, this is an opportunity to bring a bunch of guys in and have a recruiting weekend. And, you don't have to fill your stadium, but you give people, 25, 30,000 people a chance to come see the team. And for, folks with families or who may not have the money to pay, $180 a ticket or whatever it is in the fall, like it's a great opportunity to let people come see the team and, hey, maybe build your fan base. And there's a whole lot of opportunity there. And Michigan has just, for some reason, never embraced that. And I like any individual given year, it's like, okay, well, we don't have enough offensive linemen to be able to hold a representative. Like, okay, like 1 year you don't do it, like that's fine. But this is like decades now that spring games have been a major, major thing at a lot of other big schools, and Michigan has just never embraced that. And I don't know why that is.
I can tell you why that is, Tom, because I have experience in this. Like I don't like throw parties or dinners because if people don't show up, then how much people don't care about you. And so it's the same thing with Michigan. Like they don't want to have a big spring game because when only 12,000 people show up, it looks bad. And so it's a self-confidence thing. We're both working through it. Me and Michigan are both, like working through it. And so I think that's what it is. It looks bad when there's only 1,500 people in the stadium that holds 100,000, 100,000. But the good news is with only 1,500 people, that there is enough, the 2 exits in that building, then it's easy to get out of. The 3 rooms, sure, the lines are still long, but it's more accommodating than 110,000. So I think that's what it is. It looks bad when you have a spring game and nobody shows up.
I mean, I think we've learned a lot about tight camera angles the last year. Like you can shoot that and it'll be fine. Like, I mean, and like of all years this year, like why'd you only have 12,000 people at your spring game? Well, social distancing. Like, okay, like that's fine. That's what the health department said we could do. And I mean, make it free. Like it's fine. Like it doesn't have to, Ohio State used to do it where you had to bring canned goods. Like that's fine. Or just open it up for students, like whatever. But yeah, I have never understood that. I mean, you go back to something Ryan Day's talked about this spring, which is you want to have as many game-like situations to see what guys are like before, the lights come on for real in the fall. Why would you pass that opportunity up? I just, again, like if you don't have the number of offensive linemen you would need to do it, like that's fine. But they've always done it as like, when they've done something, it's like the, battle of the network TV stars. And it's like, what, why are you playing tug of war on the beach? Like just have a football game. That's literally what you're supposed to be here to do.
It is. It's just weird because it's not a thing for them. And the years in which they actually do have something, it's like, whoa, well, that's a surprise. But even then it's like, well, it's more just a practice than anything else. And, maybe it's just a cultural thing because it's a very big thing in Ohio State. It's a very big thing other places, Alabama, Georgia, national contending places. And maybe that's why maybe that's the difference. Maybe if Michigan took the spring game more seriously, they could elevate themselves beyond a 9-win program into double digits. And once you get to double digits, anything can happen. Now, granted, they still play the Big Ten East, so they are going to have to get past an Indiana and a Michigan State and a Rutgers. And so that will always, hamper them. But I think the more seriously you take everything, yeah, as we know from like James Franklin talking about Ohio State is elite, Penn State is not elite because they don't take everything as seriously as Ohio State. Even something as simple as a spring game, taking that last practice seriously, maybe is one of the things that separates the two programs. Even though, as we know, it's not talent.
That's what Nico Collins should have said earlier in the show. Is well, it's the spring game. That's it.
I mean, that's the only difference. And then we'd be like, well, makes sense. So, anything else from the linebackers, Tom, or Michigan, or anything else?
Well, I mean, Al Washington talked about the fact that he was really annoyed at the fact that the negotiations with Tennessee came out. And I mean, for those who may not remember or know, Al Washington was in talks to potentially become the next defensive coordinator at Tennessee, and then ended up deciding to come back to Ohio State. And he was deeply annoyed. And Ryan Day mentioned this earlier this spring as well. Like, he was really annoyed that came out. It's like, what do you think you do? Like, you're a football coach. You know how you're getting paid a lot of money? That's because a lot of people are interested. And you know where a lot of people are interested? Ohio State. Also in the SEC. Like, you thought you were going to have a defensive coordinator position, which you're going to get paid $1.5 million for, and no one was going to report on that? Like, what? What? I don't understand where the expectation for that would come from to begin with. But it's also a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is that we do and the folks in the media do. Like, that's our job. If we get it wrong, if we said right now Al Washington is negotiating to be the new head coach at Hawaii, and that was wrong, like, yeah, you can get mad at us for that. If we are accurately reporting information, like, I'm sorry, you don't want that to come out, but if you don't want it to come out, don't go try and get a job at Tennessee. Like, that's real easy. I mean, there's a William Randolph Hearst quote that I always think of that is often misattributed to George Orwell. News is something someone doesn't want printed. All else is advertising. Like, you have a PR department. They do a very good job. And if they were putting it out, I'm sure you could get mad at them. Like, that's fine, but that's not what we do. That's not what all the other websites and TV stations and newspapers, that's not the job. The job is to put out accurate information. And I am deeply sorry that people care, but they do. And so if accurate information is being put out, like, you really don't have a beef there. Like, sorry, don't look at another job if you don't want people to report that you're looking at another job.
You're in talks to become like the third highest paid person in the state, in terms of being paid by the state, in terms of a state employee. Basically, you got the head football coach, the head basketball coach, and then the defensive coordinator of the football team. And so, yes, there's going to be some news there and plenty of digging. And, like, boosters love to talk. Like the guys who are making the swingers trying to make things happen, love to talk. And that's on both sides and give information, and because they're trying to land their guy and the other side's trying to keep their guy. And it's, if you don't want to be covered, there are plenty of places where you can go, and Ohio State and Tennessee are not two of those places, because the SEC is crazy, Ohio State is crazy, and it's it's hard to do stuff secretly here or there, although you can do it in a McDonald's bag.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where you could have a Division I coordinator job, let alone a like Power Conference SEC kind of coordinator job, that there's not some kind of like football scoop report on or something. Like, this stuff is never ever private. Like, if more than one person is in the conversation with one of these things, like, it's almost always going to leak. Like, what? Why was any of this a surprise? I'm baffled at that. And I mean, there's just, maybe this was the welcome to the big time kind of, that you can be at Boston College or something like that, and that maybe that isn't such a big story, and there's not so much interest in it. But like, yeah, I mean, that's the nice build, the nice office and the nice building with the nice paycheck, and you get to go play for a national championship every year. Like, yeah, that's what comes along with it. Like, welcome. People don't care if I change jobs. If you want to trade paychecks, like, that's fine. I will be the person whose future negotiations get made public. But that's not, I don't think, the trade-off that anyone's going to be willing to make. I mean, I would a bit. I don't think he would.
But we can also understand, like, I mean, who wants their personal stuff just thrown out there, like negotiating on a new job? Granted, the benefits from that job are considerable, but like, it just, as a human personally, like, yeah, I don't need it out there that I'm looking at this or talking to these people. But again, it's college sports, it's college football more specifically. It's big business. It is one of the biggest businesses in terms of media, because it's one of the last things where people have to watch commercials, which is always going to make it huge. Like, you have to watch it live. That way you can't skip commercials, you can't skip ads. And it's just a very important piece of consumption in America. And there's not a lot of secrecy to stuff like this, especially, how many times do agents use the media in terms of
constantly.
Like, that's part of our job as well. It feels like, is to, put that out there so that now you've got this bidding war on coaches. So it benefits coaches just as much as it annoys, more than it annoys them, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. Like, that's when there are certain agents that are really famous for this. Like, anyone, just Google Jimmy Sexton client and watch how often those coaches are, have their names just kind of like, hey, floated for another job. Like, hey, here there might be, this school might be nosing around Nick Saban. Like, yeah, Texas might hire Nick Saban. Like, oh, hey, and then Nick Saban got another contract extension. That's weird. How did that happen? Oh, that reminds me again, our correlation and causation thing. Like, we'll talk about that later. But that is, there's a whole game that gets played here. And, sometimes the stuff that gets put out is not going to be stuff that you would choose to have put out. But again, like, that's the difference between PR and journalism. And if what's being reported is accurate, like, sorry, that's the job.
And the nice thing is, Nick Saban, when he does get the raise or whatever, he thanks the media by allowing them to, you can have your choice of a Coca-Cola or a Dasani, only just one, but as a thank you, as a for the bump up in pay. That's what they do down there. Would you like to go on? Would you like to continue on with the correlation causation before we get out of here? Would you like to really just go?
No, I think the correlation between my ranting and our podcast length is probably a pretty clear one. So I think we'll that will causation us to wrap things up right now.
That's it. Okay. All right. That will do it on the linebackers. Tuesday we'll talk to the tight ends, and maybe we'll eventually track down Steel Chambers at some point this spring to see what's going on with him, because he was going to be there with the linebackers today, talking with the linebackers. He is still a running back. Let's just keep that. Can't say that enough. He is still with the running backs. Wasn't able to make the running back Zoom. Was going to join the linebacker Zoom. Now, who knows? This is something I have said. Like, Steel Chambers as like a big H back, put him as that second tight end, and like a Jalen Hurd at Tennessee, and then so I just maybe if he shows up with the interviews with the tight ends, we probably won't get Kevin Wilson, but we could ask Jeremy Rucker, hey man, what do you think? You're looking for a second tight end. Steel Chambers is like 6'2", 225. That's bigger than you were, or heavier than you were when you got to Ohio State.
Smart. Yeah. I think you've cracked it. Now, if he comes out with the specialist, when we do the specialist interviews later this spring, do we just exclusively ask him about punting, or?
No, because he's not Australian.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Snapping, holding, like, because
there you go. Bottle flipping. Got to ask him about bottle flipping. It's tradition.
There you go. Yes. Can you even flip a bottle? And then what would Jesse Mirko say to that, Tom?
The water in my bottle flips in the opposite direction, mate. Some of our worst work yet. 5 stars.
Oh, what was this about causation and whatnot? Anyway, let's go ahead and wrap this show up before I ask Tom to say something else in Australian. No, I'm not going to do it. Thank you all for listening and watching. Make sure to check out BuckeyeScoop.com. There's practice reports coming in. Practices are Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And reports generally float in not too long after that, maybe a few hours. It just depends on when the intel comes in and how much digging it takes. So that's always something to check out. If that stuff interests you, if you like to know what's going on behind the scenes with practices and who's stepping up and you're not getting that from the coaches, then maybe become a member and you can find out who's standing out, what young guys are stepping up and what veterans are stepping up. And we have reports on that on the Ask the Insiders board, which is one of the premium features at BuckeyeScoop.com. So I would recommend becoming a member and see what it's all about. So thank you all for listening. Check out the rest of the podcast as well. Tom, what do you have on the Morning Scoop Friday?
Friday morning will be the globe-trotting Mick Walker, who has been all over the place. He had a trip down to North Carolina a couple weeks ago to scout a couple of guys. Got to watch Benji Gosnell, Ohio State's 2022, one of Ohio State's 2022 tight end commits. Got to see him in person because North Carolina is playing a spring football season instead of a fall one. So talked to him about Benji, and then he got to see a camp in Springfield. He's headed to Findlay for another camp this weekend. Seeing lots of guys, and also some potentially big news coming to the Ohio State wrestling program. Some changes could be on the way there. So we'll ask Mick about that as well. That'll be the Buckeyes or the Morning Scoop episode that drops on Friday.
Yeah, and we've got plenty of podcasts and tons of video. Alex is always doing something. Dominic Smith has some new stuff coming. Got Silver Bullets on Wednesdays, every other Wednesday right now. Sloopcast on Mondays. And then every once in a while, Kirk just goes crazy with some Scoop World orders with, who knows who's going to show up with him. So there's all kinds of podcasts and shows to check out if that's your thing. So I recommend all of it. I consume pretty much any type of listening podcast from this website. Is somebody's got to like it.
Even this one.
Well, I don't know about this one, but check it all out. We would appreciate that. And we will talk to you guys later.